Hello, my name is Jennifer Murray, and I will be your host for our new webcast, Cultivate. A webcast unlike any other that will be focusing not only on entrepreneurs, but the people that make entrepreneurs successful. I am very, very excited today because we have Shellene Suemori, who some of you might not know, but I consider her a diamond in the rough. She definitely has a low profile, but she has done more than most people probably in this industry. So Shellene, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer. It's really, I'm so thrilled to be here.
So you have been, how long have we known each other, Shellene? 4 or 5 years?
Can you believe it's almost 6? Almost 6
Is
years.
it really? So
Yeah.
when did you start?
Like 2012.
Wow. God, time flies, doesn't it? That's crazy.
I know.
Crazy. Well, before we get into how you actually got in the industry, I'd like to talk about your very impressive education. You have a degree in cell and cellular molecular biology and chemistry, which pretty much fits the gamut of a lot of cannabis for not only producing products, but, you know, analytics as well.
Yeah, I guess I went to school, and it was a really long road, even coming to that degree. I've had a really long and kind of twisted road in my life, but once upon a time I was a pre-med student, and then I kind of diverted into social services for a few years and realized I really needed to go back into research. It just was where I belonged, and so I went back and I finished my degree in cell and molecular biology, and had some pretty amazing experiences, and ended up here somehow.
Well, I know you have in your amazing background NASA. You did some projects for NASA. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. When I was finishing up my degree, I had a really, really amazing mentor come into my life, and I was so lucky to have him. And he was one of my molecular professors, and he had notified me that there was a call for proposals for a NASA grant through the school, and so I was immediately interested because it was something that we had kind of chatted about on the side. And he said, "Well, you should really write a proposal and jump into this." And so I did, and I went and met with the guy that was in charge of the program, was a physics professor, and I kind of think I took him by storm because I don't think he had any idea what I was saying when I was sitting across the table from him, telling him all the things that I wanted to do. And I think he just looked at me and he said, "Okay, yes, go do it." And so I wrote the proposal, and we got to be part of this amazing program, which kind of was my springboard into doing 2 more launches after that. So we did one where I wanted to look at really mutations in cells due to prolonged space flight from radiation exposure, and the cell repair mechanisms that correlate with those. And he said, "Well, they don't do biological projects typically, and yours would be the first." And so there was a lot of hoops that I had to jump through for safety, and I got to use some really great tools in genetic manipulation that I love in order to ensure that those things were safe. And we got approval to fly, and then I was actually invited to go to speak at a national conference in Washington, D.C., and ask for what they call plus-up money for continued research in the program, and got to meet with some senators and speak with them about that as well. And it just really spurred me into more research in astrobiology. And I thought that's where I would stay. We were doing some amazing educational outreach programs in schools, and I thought this is just more fun than I ever thought I could have. But our funding dried up. Our funding was cut by almost 70%. And then there was no more school outreach, and I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I can't possibly go back to streaking plates in a lab. I can't possibly do something where I don't get to kind of spearhead some research and do something that's new. And I kind of worked in business for a year and got to work under a really amazing CEO and learned a lot about how he built his business. And then was watching kind of what was going on in the science world, and an ad came up for a lab director, and I thought, oh, okay, according to what they're looking for, I think I can really do this, and I think I'm ready to go back. And so I replied to the ad, and I was selected to have an interview, and I showed up to the facility, and it was only after entering the facility and sitting down that the guy across the table, the general manager at the time, said, by the way, we're a cannabis facility.
Oh my
do you
God!
have any issues with medical marijuana? Yeah, that was
right.
it.
What were you thinking right then?
Think about it. I wasn't really thinking anything. I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't really know medical marijuana was looking to set up a lab or really looking into kind of, this area. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. I took about 10 seconds, and I was like, all right, well, honestly, marijuana had never really been part of my life prior to that. And so I thought, okay, yeah, I get it. I see it. And then I just looked at him and I said, no, let's move forward. I have zero moral objections to this, and I can't think of any reason why I wouldn't, continue to talk to you guys. So that was the beginning of my road into the marijuana industry.
And don't you feel like, scientists are interested in science, right? Whether they, whether they're for it or against it, they're there to get the truth. They're there to do the research, and they're there to figure it out. So I'm sure that you were like, oh, well, this could be, something new and fun, and I get to learn, I get to bring my skill set into another brand new industry. Did you know anything about the industry at that time? How big it was? Was it regulated? Anything like that?
I knew nothing. At first I thought, okay, great. I have another opportunity to learn, and I love a challenge, and I love research, and so I was immediately drawn to the opportunity, thinking there's got to be so much to learn here. And so I immediately went home, and I went to the research library, and I started digging and reading, and I would email back, the general manager, did you think about this? Are you doing this? And I got a lot of, I'm not sure, I don't know, let me get back to you. And I probably had emailed him 3, 4, 5 times. And finally he just said, look, just come in and work here.
You'll figure it out. Well, which is how it was back then, right? There was no manual. There was no one to call. Yeah. You just got in there and did
nothing. And I walked in completely empty. There were no prior records. There was no, SOPs. There was no processes in place. There was nothing. So I walked into a completely blank slate. So I got pretty excited about being able to figure out what had been going on, what needed to change, and where it could go. And for me, that was just another area of research, and it was a brand new area of research.
Right.
So it was incredibly exciting. And then the more I read, the more excited I got, right? And as a molecular biologist, the more I started thinking about drug delivery and, how many people can this help in how many different ways, and how many plant constituents are there. So my mind just started spinning. And that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. I don't know that I'll ever leave the industry now.
I know. As hard as it is, it just sucks you in, and you think of all the patients, and it's like, I got to do this. And you got to stop and smell the roses and realize you're making history here. And especially in the science realm, I owned a testing lab, and I had a few women right out of college, and I expressed to them, like, look, you're going to be an expert in a science field when normally, you don't make a name for yourself, if ever, in science. And sure enough, this young gal, she's, I think, 26, and she's a lab director already. So amazing opportunities. And the company we are speaking about is Dixie Elixirs, correct?
Yes. Yeah. It was a tiny operation the first time I met them. They were sharing a facility with a food manufacturer, and it was a really interesting time, I think, to join the industry. It was a small operation, and I had a tiny little closet office down a hallway that was right across from the food kitchen, and every day I went home smelling like onions. It was really quite something, considering I was working in the cannabis industry. But that was how it was when it was medical in Colorado, and shortly after it went rec, and then then things got crazy.
Yeah, and I think that there was more ability to have other real estate. When people came in, obviously it was extremely hard to lease buildings, especially if they had a loan on their building. And then, of course, you would go to, I grew up in Colorado, right? So a lot of the people that I went to school with, they had buildings all over. And so when people approached them, hey, we want to use your building, they said, well, I think I'll do it myself. And so, and plus the retrofitting and everything like that is usually not occurring now. People are starting from scratch, and of course it's loosened up on who will lease and everything. But I do remember the early Dixie building, and then of course the brand new building where they actually built out a lab.
Yeah, that building had been prior to that. I believe it was a commercial bakery, and so it was a lot of it was open, and so we were able to take that and turn it into a new facility.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so after Dixie, what was your next adventure?
That's a good word, adventure. So after Dixie, while I was at Dixie, I was approached and asked if I had any interest in what would be upcoming as the New York medical market. And New York, I knew, was going to be extremely pharmaceutical and really patient-centered medicine, which I was just craving in my life at that time, because although we were doing things above board at Dixie, and we were, the first to really test everything and extensively, and we were doing some really, really great things, there are always, points where you know that your growth is limited by where you are, and if there are other opportunities to grow and take your skills to the next level, you do that. And so very amicably, I left Dixie to pursue a license in New York with a team that was writing for that license. And we buckled down, and we spent, a good 3 months or more working on that license. And we were lucky enough to be chosen as one of the 5 registered organizations.
One of the 5. So, I was just going to say that. Very competitive in a very large populated state, and only 5 licenses. So that's huge. That's a big win.
Yeah, it was one of the most exciting days of my career, for sure. The day that we were chosen, it was a surreal feeling, but it was very challenging. We got our license, I believe it was in July, and by January 1st, we were supposed to have not only the facility built, fully integrated with the grow, with extraction, and with production, and we had 4 dispensaries assigned with our license, and we had to have at least one of those dispensaries open with products on the shelf by January. So it was extraordinarily challenging. And a really expensive endeavor, but it was at the same time a lot of fun, because we were just in a constant forward motion, and everybody worked together really well, and it was achievable. It sounds impossible, but it was completely achievable, and it was a great feeling to hit that January 1 deadline.
Yeah.
So that's
And
where I went after
with
Dixie.
that, that's what?
That's where I went after Dixie.
Right.
It was a
But you
whirlwind of
got
the
to
next
learn,
year or so.
and then you got to learn, was it a new skill set or of course you write in science, but had you ever applied or done any kind of licensing work before?
I hadn't. I mean, I'd written grant proposals, 3. And so writing isn't foreign to me by any means. So that wasn't, terribly daunting, but we had an amazing team. So, I did my bit, and then they polished everything and made it very, easy to read and free-flowing, and it was a beautiful application. And so there was a lot of really highly skilled people on there with editing experience and what have you that really polished everything and made it come together. So that was great. I got to be involved in the site and the building design, which was really exciting for me because I had been able to learn quite a bit here in Colorado with regulation and Dixie and all the, over-regulation with extraction and labs and what have you, and testing and whatever. And so I got to be a part of that kind of from the ground up, which was great and new for me and really rewarding. So I got to do that, and then, I got to also build out the lab from scratch, select the equipment for the products we were making, select the product line, just be involved in all of it from from the bottom up to the bottled package walking it, going out the door. So there was a lot of new learning for me there, and it was really a great rewarding experience. And and then with the same founder of that company, a few of us went on to start another company, more globally centered in the recreational market. So we did that as well. And then, kind of came to the point in my career yet again where I thought, okay, I see another place where I can grow and where I can contribute. And I feel like these things are, I've brought them as far as that I can bring them, and I've contributed what I can. Mm-hmm. And the companies will continue to grow and thrive, beyond that. And they have, which is amazing. And then I moved on to Arizona. On to the next one.
Let's back up. Yes, so let's back up. Obviously very prosperous because you guys got bought out by MedMen. And for the people that don't know MedMen, they just built a dispensary on Fifth Avenue. Mm-hmm. So that was a big event. So clearly you had a good, solid company, license, everything that somebody wanted to purchase, which is very important because I think that's a lot of people's exit games, right? Either get bought up by a larger, if you will, chain or whatever, or exit out. I know a lot of companies are hoping to be bought by pharma, and I'd like to know your take on that because how many companies have you seen that are GMP, FDA ready? Exactly, not many.
How many have I personally seen that are ready for pharma to come in and just essentially empty your office and pharma comes in? None. Right. I haven't seen any that are. It's just the nature of the industry, right? Everybody's moving so quickly, and even if you're doing things above board, you're not doing them, in a nice ISO 9001 clean room necessarily. Right. I know there are some people that are reaching for those standards, but I don't think that necessarily pharma is even going to walk into their door and snap them up tomorrow. So it's kind of interesting to talk about pharma because they're already kind of in the game anyway, in the back door, and they're doing their own research. And so I'm just not sure. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that they're going to need to buy anybody, or if they're just going to wait the game out for deregulation and do their own thing. So I don't know. It's really, I guess.
Well, they have and they have a lot of disposable cash. A lot.
And time.
So, Yeah, and time and everything else. So, and can get grants and everything else. So, but I think this feeds in perfectly there before we talk about where you're currently at. But talk to me about what you think about GW Pharma and, Monsanto and Bayer and, what do you think that they are going to be able to corner the CBD market?
Wow. I don't think so in any short time frame. I just don't see it quite yet. No, and I don't know that they'll go for the CBD market if I were them. You might want to go for something a little bit bigger than that, because CBD is, it's so volatile. The regulations around CBD, and people are so scared whether they can ship it or can't ship it, or who can they buy from, and what was the source material, and how do you verify that? And there are still some shady people in this industry that you cannot necessarily verify where their supply chain comes from. So, it's still so new that there's still so much cleaning up that needs to be done. But I don't see it anytime soon. I see them coming in, but coming in later. And so I see that there's still an opportunity. And I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but I would like for the opportunity to lie in the private citizens, right? So I would like for us to get it right. That's been my drive from day one is, come on, guys, this is an opportunity. Strive for regulation, strive for GMP, strive for safe medicine, strive to do it right, spend the money, spend the time, and prove that we can regulate and control this industry privately so that we don't wait for the day where pharma says, look at all these yahoos, look at all these potheads. They still don't know what they're doing. They still can't get it together. They still don't have safe medicine. So come on, hand us over the licenses, deregulate, government, and, we'll take it from here because we know what we're doing. That is my biggest fear, is that the whole industry squanders this opportunity, and then the government hands it to them on a silver platter because we couldn't get it together. That's where I think we need to focus, is like, come on, all of us collectively, we need to raise the bar.
Yeah, and that's been talked about for years now. We need to get together and we need to get this stuff done, and people are scared. And here's the hard part, right? Because we're there for the patients. I mean, I started because of the patients, and I continue to talk about health and safety, so people are very aware that there are a lot of so-called medicine that is not tested. And so, how are people going to start taking this seriously and spend the money? Now, of course, if you don't know out there, we have a 280 tax problem, and also we don't get grants, and also you can't use your insurance for this medicine. So, if 280 goes away, imagine what people can be, use their capital for. And I know there are so many people that want to do research, but where is your payoff right now? I mean, people are, a lot of companies are having trouble just staying afloat. And I know a lot of people wanted to stay in medical, but couldn't, just because they couldn't survive. So it's going to be interesting. And we want people. Yeah, absolutely. And the challenge is we want patients to get help. So, does that mean, GW Pharma comes out with some amazing products? Do we want to, shun them for that? Well, God, I want kids to not have to suffer through epilepsy whatever that means. And so, you know, there's going to be some things that have to be worked out there. And I still, as much as, you know, we have had more camaraderie, it's still broken. And especially, I mean, you look at Colorado, I mean, how many of those operations are going to be able to get through regulation? I mean, I'm hearing 5 to 10%. So
yeah,
it's going to be
incredibly
interesting.
expensive to be in this business. You know, and I think the general public thinks, you know, that there's just cash hemorrhaging out, you know, out the doorways of marijuana businesses, and that's just simply untrue. I mean, the market is still volatile. The prices still fluctuate. The price of raw material is still continuing to go down as it continues to be a commodity. And you know, it's a really interesting business to be in. It's very challenging. There's, you know, no one's hemorrhaging money. It's incredibly expensive to be in this business. And I think that the people that are, you know, they're all there for different reasons. But, you know, I would say that, you know, for science, I think that you have to have a reason to be here, because otherwise there are other more lucrative places, you know, industries to work in. But if you don't have a good reason to be here, I don't think you'll be here very long, because, you know, the road is wrought with frustration in the cannabis industry, and especially if you're a seasoned scientist that maybe comes from academia or other research facilities. It's not the same whatsoever, and there's a lot of compromise and a lot of weight and a lot of lack of funding that you have to kind of accept and work with, and your reason for being here has to kind of outweigh those compromises. So, yeah, it's incredibly challenging, I think, for everybody, top to bottom, you know, to continue to be in the business. And I think that's why we're starting to see a lot of these places, you know, kind of merge with others. So you'll see less small businesses and more partnerships, or more big businesses. You'll see, you know, a handful of people having their hands in or on a lot of the other businesses. So I don't believe we're going to continue to see a lot of privately owned businesses. I think we're going to see, you know, 10, you know, primarily own most of the businesses in Colorado very soon. It's just the way that I see things going. So the opportunities becoming less for, you know, the mom and pop. I remember even 5 years ago in Colorado, it seemed like all you had to do was like have a great idea and grab a license, and you were in the business. And you know, with some sustainable future, and that's just no longer the case. It's not that easy, and it's way too expensive.
No, and you know, when I talk to people and they say, "Yeah, we want to go to Colorado," I'm like, big mistake. Big mistake. I mean, first, obviously, the prices are super low. Second, same with edibles. I mean, there's tiny margins. They keep changing the rules and the labels, and you know, you just have a hard time making it work. And listen, it's going to be real quick where dispensaries, you know, they get so many people coming in that they'll probably just, like any other industry, start making you pay for shelf space. And then, so now your profit goes even lower. I mean, it's a miracle that a lot of these companies have made it from when we started. I mean, it is an absolute miracle. And some people have done very well, very few, but some people have done and have been in the right places. And then others, you know, they underestimated, or, you know, they have people from corporate America coming in, and you know, they'd have no idea what they're getting into. And so a lot of people have come in and left already. So it's different. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen your fair share of those.
Oh, yeah, the highest level people from amazing places will walk in, and, you know, 4 to 8 weeks later, they're like, wow, I did not realize, not only is this a startup culture, but this is incredibly difficult. And, you know, not only that, I mean, sometimes we put the challenges on ourselves, right? Because we're not always the best partners to one another because we're so competitive. And, we're not collaborative whatsoever because everybody thinks they have a secret and they have the next amazing magic thing. And frankly,
Industry, what do they say? What do they say?
Yes.
Industry disruptor. If I hear that one more time, I'm gonna vomit. Please do not use that terminology.
Yeah, I don't know what that would be. I think that there's a little bit, and that's just because the industry got big and got big quickly. And so the people that were here were, instantly coined experts. And the people that, it was so funny when I first came to this industry, and they'd be like, oh yeah, he's really like a total, flower expert on flower. And I'm like, well, why? Well, he's been smoking since he was 14. I'm like, what?
Right. Woo! That makes him an expert. So silly.
Okay, I understand that there's some knowledge that comes with that. I totally appreciate that. But let's just bring that back to like reality for just a second and get the egos in check, because believe me, there are things you don't know, right?
A lot of things you don't know.
Yeah.
Just like what you were doing. I mean, most people,
Yeah, I mean, every day I work in this industry, I feel like I know less. And I don't say that to say, I'm failing. I say that to say everything's moving so quickly. The information comes from a lot of different places. I mean, there are reliable sources. There are some real research happening, but there's a lot of anecdotal garbage out there too. And so then you have to sift through and figure out, okay, what's the truth and who's marketing whatever they're selling next, right?
right.
It's a constant battle to try and even stay current or really even understand what's going on. And the fact that we all keep things so secret until we feel like we're ready to talk about them means that there are some amazing people out there that you've never heard of. Or there are some amazing technologies out there that are in development that you're not going to see for another 6 months, that they're pretty awesome,
right?
So it's a really weird atmosphere to try and feel like anyone can really call themselves an expert in, because things move all the time. And
that's another one that drives me nuts.
I
mean, so what you've been? Yeah, I'm not an industry expert. I mean, for God's sakes, it's like, well, I've been growing for 20 years, but yeah, we have all of these, new nutrients and new facilities and new software and I mean, if you're still growing like you were 40 years ago, probably not the best product. Right. Okay, well, let's get to your current position and kind of what you're doing there.
Okay. So currently I'm Chief Science Officer for the farm in Sunday Goods in Arizona. And I am responsible for all product development, safety, extraction, et cetera. But we are moving at lightning speed, so every day is just, a collaboration of whoever we need to work with in order to get, the next goal done. But, it's an amazing team of people. We have a 7-acre indoor glass greenhouse in Arizona, and manufacturing, extraction there, as well as wholesale, and currently a couple retail licenses again also, so we'll be building those out to brick and mortar. We also have an e-com platform there with the delivery service, so it's a pretty big operation. It keeps everybody pretty busy.
And just for those that don't know out there, in Arizona, you don't have separate licenses. You have one license that covers, right, all of the different, grow, dispense, and everything. One of my questions, of course,
there are separate licenses.
Are they?
Yeah, definitely.
But isn't it one company has the access to all underneath it? Oh, maybe I don't understand it. So will you explain that?
Well, I don't, I'm not big on the licensing part of what we're doing either. But yeah, we have a cultivation license, and we have a processing license, and we have even though it's unregulated, we still had to go through inspection to have a kitchen in order to have products made there, and then you have to apply and be awarded dispensing license as well. So we have 2 of those currently, but they're all held under the same company, but they're all different licensing.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, held under the same company. I got it. Okay.
Right.
And another thing that I don't want to forget is testing is not mandatory in Arizona, which is a medical marijuana state. How, without these testing labs certified, how do you, has it been difficult working with the testing labs? How many testing labs are there? What's going on with that? Because making products or making anything, you have to have accurate testing.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Arizona is a medical marijuana state with no regulation for testing and no regulation for several things, actually, product labeling, et cetera, as we do in Colorado, New York, et cetera, Washington, Oregon. They're not quite there yet. We're hoping that gets pushed through sooner than later, although it was voted down again last month. So, I tell people the best way to get regulation is to get recreational marijuana in your state, because it means more money. So the states will pony up, and they will have it in their budget to pay for regulatory bodies, to pay for rulemaking committees, to take care of all of these things and ensure product safety. If there is money coming in from the industry, and that means taxes, and that means a recreational or adult use market. So if people keep voting it down, it's likely to be unregulated, which is absolutely insane to call something medicine and not test it. So, but that is indeed what, and it's not just Arizona. I can't point the finger at Arizona because it was the same in Colorado at first. So, it's just one of those completely disconnected parts of the industry versus regulation. And it really comes down to finances, I believe, which is sad. But I can't point to anything else making sense on why we wouldn't put this infrastructure in place prior to a recreational state. So we, however, do test everything. It's just part of my core is, as a scientist, is you test everything. You test your incoming material. You ask for, if it's not your material, you ask for a certificate of authenticity with documentation on the safety of that material, and you test again after you've done whatever process on that material, whether you've made it into rosin or shatter, or just flour, or an extract or what have you. You test again, and then in your final product, you test again, and you want to make sure that dosing is accurate and your products are homogeneous, and that you're giving people what you're saying you're giving them. Otherwise, it doesn't go out the door. So, that's kind of been my take on the industry ever since I came into this industry in 2012. And the folks at Dixie were completely on board with that, and it was a lot of money that they were not used to spending in Colorado. It was a lot of money for New York. It's a lot of money for Arizona. But it's really, really important that if you're going to, talk the talk, you should walk the walk. And if you're really making something that you want to be proud of, then you better be able to prove it. And if it takes a piece of paper to make people feel better, then get the piece of paper. Do it right, or get ready to close your doors pretty soon when regulation does hit. So it's so much better to just do it properly than shortcut it. And then we can all feel really good about what we're doing. And again, we can continue to raise the bar in the industry so that the government doesn't have to hand it off to pharma because we, quote, don't know what we're doing. So that's kind of, it's core to who I am, that if I wouldn't give it to my grandmother, I don't want it to leave the facility. So, it's not actually very complicated, but it's a really hard sell for some people because I totally get that it's really expensive, and it's almost so expensive that it takes some people out of the market, and I get that. So I appreciate the challenge, but it doesn't necessarily excuse not doing everything you can to make sure that what you're giving the end consumer is safe.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and, let's not forget what was it, it was something like 42 samples out of 45 samples had pesticides in California. I just familiarized myself with the rules the other day. They're quantifying, so of course, if you have a pass-fail for pesticides or any other test, it's much less expensive. Well, they're quantifying 60 pesticides. They're also quantifying, I want to say 20 to 30 hydrocarbons, where in Colorado, I still don't think pesticides is mandatory. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we only had like 7, I think, hydrocarbons like butane, propane, naphtha, and those kind of things. So California, I believe you're looking at a suite of tests. I think there's 8. I think you're looking at about $1,000. Plus the amount of product you have to give, and that's every 50 pounds. So that's going to be that is a killer, and but it's going to take us time to see if all of those tests are necessary. Are they not necessary? I remember back when we had so many the really good companies, they always tested. And we were getting some E. coli, and we couldn't figure it out. Quite a bit of our clients were getting E. coli early on, and, it came down to the fertilizer, the worms. Well, worms, poop too, and that's where the E. coli was coming from. So it's just a matter of, learning and getting to know more of this plant, because obviously the more we know, the better we can, help people, the better we can manage testing and, figure all these things out. But again, I believe you can write off testing. I think that's a write-off, whereas, your employees and some of the other business expenses aren't a write-off. So that's probably the one good thing about it. Plus, people want to produce safe products. Of course they do. But again, their margins, they're barely scraping by. So
it's tough.
So let's dig into some of the science. Let's talk about how far, and tell me some stories about, what you have seen over the years, kind of like my E. coli story, and, what do you think is in the short-term future? Of course, you don't have a crystal ball, but I'd like to know some of your thoughts.
In terms of testing alone, or?
No, just science, product science, where we're going. You're familiar with extraction, maybe add some of that in. Just all kinds of science in different areas, how far we've come, and, what do you see for the future?
Gotcha. Well, extraction is always a little bit hard to say. I know that there are a couple of really interesting things coming forth in the next 6 months to a year that really aren't even out of the closet yet. I think it's really interesting. Extraction seems to be this evolutionary cycle, right? So it was all butane, and then CO2 came in and was kind of a new kid on the block, and then CO2 kind of got shunned a little bit because some of the first machines were not terribly efficient, but then they continue to evolve, and there are actually some really amazing technologies out there using CO2 now with really massive outputs, so that's kind of nice to see. And then you see these other people come in and try to reinvent the wheel, and I've seen things with naphtha, Freon, all kinds of things that are not necessarily any better, Right. It's just
Mhm.
because, people think, well, here's another way to do it. And so they want to put their foot in the market. And so they put something different out there. Um, but largely, I haven't seen anything that really gives you a significantly different end product, right? So they all have their pluses and
Hmm.
minuses. And, you could say butane has more flavor in the extract and CO2 maybe doesn't, but now CO2 is doing some things that they're coming pretty close to that anyway. And then, ethanol and what have you, and not having to go through the winterization and dewaxing is sure convenient, not having to have that step in there. And, you get some of these other things with Freon and hexane and what have you. And I look at them all and I think, okay, but how different is the end product for the consumer? And what are you trying to make with that? And is it really such a game changer that it's worth a brand new technology, maybe with different safety precautions or maybe with different, residual solvent levels? And in large part, there hasn't been a really big disruption. So I'm waiting, and I know there are a couple coming, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to be able to do. I think we're going to see some great new solventless techniques come out in the next year or so that
Yeah.
actually will change the game. Maybe not as much in the end product, but in the process itself that will make it so much cleaner that we all are striving for. And if they can dial those in and get the yields where they need to be, then I think that those will be the next game changers for the industry. But so I'm excited to see what happens there. And, with cultivation, the same. Everybody's doing something a little bit different, and there's so many master cultivation artists and people with amazing experience. And then there are people that are brand new that are just doing everything, very, very clean and enclosed, and they're getting some completely different and amazing results. So I see that diverging a little bit from the very organic nature of growing to the very clinical nature of growing, and they're both getting beautiful plants, but they're kind of different, and they appeal to different people. So it's it's still
Yeah.
a very, developmental time in the industry, but science in general, I think, still is largely underfunded because it's a little bit
Mhm.
slow because we have to do things over, and there's a lot of learning to be had. And a lot of times it's
Mhm.
hard for shareholders to understand that learning has value because it doesn't have an immediate return on investment. Um, so it's a bit slow and it's underfunded, and they don't see, well, if I do this today, what's it going to make me in 3 months? Because we're not always
Yeah.
sure. It's going to make you something in 3 months, but we'll definitely be learning something from that, and we'll definitely be moving something forward. But that's not always, at this stage in the game, that's not necessarily what your what your shareholders are looking for. So that's it's kind of slow. Honestly, it's kind of slow in science in cannabis right now because it's just largely underfunded. But I see more
Well,
scientists coming into cannabis, which is great.
yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of chemists and scientists are really wanting to exit pharma, and this is, the perfect place for them.
Mm-hmm.
What scares me is, and I'm not a chemist, but okay, so say you use naphtha, which naphtha is paint thinner and causes cancer, so I'm not sure why you would use that. But do these hydrocarbons change molecular structures within the cannabinoids? If we get them all out, okay, but if they change the structure of the plant,
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
don't know.
there are a lot of things that you can do, even accidentally, right? That will change the molecular
Yeah,
structure of a cannabinoid, right?
right.
And those sometimes are unpredicted. Naphtha and those things have been used so long, and I think that we see their introduction largely from maybe some of the scientists that are coming from food or pharma, because naphtha and a lot of the other hydrocarbons have been used for years, decades in food, and they've been completely, deemed safe by the FDA. But what we don't know is what scares me, right? So some of these things that are used for extraction or what have you in food products are one thing, but when you use something to extract and you have residual levels of solvents that you're combusting then into your lungs is a different thing, because that hasn't
smoking.
been done for
Yep.
decades. So I
Yep.
think, there's a lot of unknowns, and for me personally, if there's no great benefit to using something like that, I don't understand why we use something like that, right? So if you can get the same
Mhm.
product and you can deliver the same medicine to a patient without introducing another level of risk, why would you not do that? It just,
Yeah.
for
Right.
me, it doesn't make any sense, and it's probably just my background in research going, why do I introduce this variable that I can't predict? I choose not to, right? But a lot of people want the next greatest, shiniest thing, and so that's why we see a
Mhm.
lot of these different extraction technologies coming in and saying, I can do X, Y, Z, but I won't tell you what's in this box over here, and then you find out, oh, there's hexane in that box. Well, maybe I don't want to use that.
Right.
Instead
Right.
of, pushing the bar forward on non-solvent and more natural things that we could be doing. So I'd like to see people spend their time on that side of the fence rather than, oh, I can do it with the solvent too. I'll make a machine and it'll be a brand new machine because it's a brand new solvent. Well, not
Mhm.
necessarily.
No.
If you're not solving a
Well, and
problem and you're introducing a risk, you shouldn't do it.
well, absolutely. And you touched on solventless, and I actually hope to have a company on that absolutely is doing. They come from biotech, and they are doing solventless, completely solventless. Your
Mhm.
yield is way higher than CO2, and it's priced less, I believe, than CO2. So, and I always thought about sonication or
Mhm.
electricity or some of those things. Again, I'm not a chemist, but those things have come across my head, and I'm wondering if anybody is doing any of those kind of things as well, and if that's possible or cost effective, or can you scale up? Again, I don't know.
There are people doing sonication with water, which I think is going to be very
Oh,
exciting.
that sounds
Yeah.
neat. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and
Yeah, I
and
think
let's
we're going
take
to see
let's
some new
take a
players real soon.
well, and let's take a trip down memory lane for those who don't know. First came blasting. Blowing tubes, blasting, where you would buy your crappy butane can at your hardware store, and you'd take a PVC pipe and you'd stuff your marijuana in it, and you would take your butane can that's not supposed to be upside down, and blow it through your cannabis, probably stripping off that nice plastic, putting that all in there. And there was no way to get all of that butane out. And in fact, those cans, they're not pure butane. They have metal shards, they
Right.
have dirt, they have a plethora. And I remember when people would come in and bring samples, and I would say, okay, well, how'd you extract this? Oh, butane, we have air gas, we have butane. I'd get the chromatograph. It has a complete fingerprint, right? If they're blowing tubes, just
Mhm.
from the chromatograph and the footprint. So then they stopped using PVC pipes and then did glass, and a lot of people blew up things, and it was very
Yeah.
scary. It was very scary, but that was the evolution, and I can't imagine how many leftover parts per million of hydrocarbons were in the early days. Yikes.
Oh, I have no idea.
They weren't getting
Yeah,
high
I
from
remember
cannabis. They were getting high from the chemicals. Yeah.
that. Yeah, definitely. Well, either that or just a lack of oxygen because they blew up their garage.
Right. Right. Or their the house they leased, which
Yeah.
is
Do you
very,
remember
I mean, and
all the
yeah.
yeah, there was so many news stories about, a blown up garage in Colorado from somebody
Oh yeah.
blasting butane. I mean, that's when I like put my foot in this industry, and I was like, holy cow, what did I do? Like, oh my gosh, don't tell anybody I work in the marijuana industry.
Well, right, and it's like, and then they decided to smoke a cigarette and didn't realize, the room was full of butane. It's really sad too, and we don't mean to make light of it, but it's just par for the course of how this industry started, and it got us to here, and it brought in some really smart scientists like yourself that are doing it right and coming up with better products, better yields, better margins on products, and but it started out there, and you can't knock it. But it was very interesting. So let's talk about what are some of the mistakes that you have seen made or you made yourself that has brought you some great learning curves, or what I mean, some good things you did, some bad things you did, because more people learn from mistakes than they ever do from their successes.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, I've made so many mistakes.
Well, pick some
insane.
doozies.
Oh my God. Well, I guess like I would say, first of all, like, if something sounds too good, it is. There are a lot of people, and again, there are a lot of people that promote themselves as experts or that can do X, Y, Z, and even put on a really good show sometimes, and will leave you hanging when push comes to shove and they can't deliver on what they said they were going to do. And sometimes it doesn't matter how much due diligence that you try to do, it just happens that way. And I think that's just still because we're in such a fast-moving new industry that sometimes it's really hard to know what is real, right? Until you actually use it yourself. So first of all, take everything everyone says and make them prove it, and then, make them give you a money-back guarantee if it doesn't actually work. I guess, that's number one, right? Build good relationships and be choosy about those relationships. You said I've been,
and due diligence, and don't be in a hurry.
Yeah.
Due diligence, and don't, if somebody's pressuring you, we got to do this, it's not good.
Yeah.
In my experience.
It's wrong, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, be choosy about who you align yourself with. You have to. There are still some people that are, not necessarily looking out for your best interest in this industry, that are likely going to be gone in the next, 2 to 5 years, and you don't necessarily want to be aligned with those people. And it's hard to know, right? So, network, but be choosy, be very choosy. And, you said that I've been under the radar, and a lot of that has been just because I've simply been very busy. But a lot of that is also by design, because while I could spend, 10 hours a week self-promoting, I just feel like there's so much more work I need to do, or so much more I could be learning. And a lot of times those people that are self-promoting are not necessarily your best experts. And I would say, if you want an expert, find somebody who's actually doing the work, right? Or has done the work in the recent past, right? Not right. I think I know about something, but find somebody who's actually done it and talk to them, and align yourself with those people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's more places to look than ever. Again, starting early, there was no one to call. I remember calling DORA, the Department of Regulating Agency. She said I was going to get arrested, that it was illegal. So we have way more resources than ever, which brings me into, future scientists, recent grads, or even people that are interested that are going to college. What's some advice you can give them on maybe what to study for what they want to go into, or how do they get into this industry? Via science.
Via science.
I mean, if they want to get into science.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people, obviously, both at Dixie and then, in New York and now in Arizona. And it's funny, I primarily look for people that are extremely eager, that have a really good reason to be here, because it is a lot of work and more than they're probably expecting and maybe more than they're used to. So, I think it's all goes down to like your why. Why do you want to be here? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What is your kind of your career path that you would carve out for yourself if you could? And what are you willing to do to get there, right? So I'm not necessarily always looking for somebody that's a molecular biologist or a chemist, or but I think it's really important to understand chemistry. It's really important to understand gas chemistry. It's really really important to understand good lab processes, safety and sanitation. Documentation is a huge one for me, and just treat this like a lab that makes medicine, because that's what you're doing. So every gram counts.
Yes.
And treat it like an analytical chemistry lab. And if that person has that skill set, then they generally do really, really well. But paired with that, they kind of have to have, well, what I always look for is the soul of a researcher. That's what I call it. It's a very ambiguous term, but I mean, when you meet somebody and they want to be in this industry, you know if they have it or they don't. You know why they're there. And it becomes apparent within the first 5 minutes whether they've got that or they don't have that. And I think that those people generally do really well. And I love having those people on my team that I can, I like to collaborate with my team. I tell them we're not allowed to have egos when we work together. Everybody has a voice. We have a common goal, and we're going to get it done. And my job is to support whatever it is that they need, as long as we're moving on that path. So, that's really the kind of person I look for, someone who will get it done, even if it's uncomfortable to get it done, because oftentimes you're working in a startup, you don't have all of your tools, or you don't have them yet, and you have to make some compromises to what maybe you're used to at the university. So that's really the type of person.
And you also have to see the forest. You also have to see the forest between the trees, too. It's like you have to understand you're in a brand new industry, It is so exciting, and think about it. We're going to have degrees for cannabis. We're going to have degrees for all sorts of different science in cannabis, and so it's just incredible. I feel the future is bright, especially in science, and of course, I'm biased about that. But is there anything else that you can share that would be very beneficial for people that may be listening, and about anything you have talked about the industry? Anything you can think that would be beneficial?
Wow. I guess I would just say education, right? So we need to support each other. We need to promote education by supporting each other, by sharing information and ideas. We need to push for regulation nationally. We need to push for standardized testing labs so that we can trust the results as manufacturers that we get. We need, it's just about embracing the industry and owning it as, private citizens, and understanding that it is medicine, and we're here for a reason, right? We're here to help people. We're here to bring something to the population that that has previously been denied, right? And I think that it is
Yep.
fundamentally wrong for any country to deny their citizens medicine. And cannabis,
Yep.
no matter how you use it, is medicine. And so I think
Yep.
that it's, it needs to be all of our aim and goal, no matter what part of this business that we're in, that we push to bring that bar higher continually, and normalization of the medicine and, destigmatizing that, I think, is amazing for those people that need the medicine that are almost embarrassed to use it. So I think that
Yes.
just embracing the industry as a whole and understanding that we're all working toward a common goal and start acting like we're all working toward a common goal would be pretty amazing.
Right.
That's really it. I think that's what we should all be doing every day when we wake up.
Yes, and a very important thought for me to end on is there is no doubt that you, your family member, your colleague, one of your friends, one of your friends' friends is going to get something, a serious disease that cannabis will help. So keep your mind open and, again, educate yourself and do the research because this is an amazing plant. Of course, not for everybody, but chances are that you or somebody you know is going to absolutely need it. So, well, Shellene, it has absolutely been a pleasure. I learn from you every time we speak, and we would love to follow up with you and see more adventures because I'm sure that, again, you're just getting started.
Thanks so much, Jen.
And again, thanks so much, Shellene. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
You're so welcome. Thanks, Jennifer, for all you do.